What is up, y'all? Welcome back to another episode of the 2 Game Podcast. So Marvel just finished up their showcase at San Diego Comic-Con, and big news was announced during this presentation. So Robert Downey Jr. is returning to the MCU, not as Iron Man, but as Victor Von Doom, Dr. Doom himself, in Avengers 5, titled Avengers Doomsday, and Avengers 6, titled Avengers Secret Wars. So right off the bat, I feel conflicted with this news. So on one hand, I find it interesting because he's returning not as Tony Stark as Dr. Doom, but he is returning as Victor Von Doom, Dr. Doom. And they specifically mentioned that in the showcase. So different character altogether, not Tony's. And what's interesting about that is the fact that this is going to be a variant of Dr. Doom, obviously, because it's going to look like Tony's. But what does that mean for the overall MCU? What does that mean for the characters that know who Tony Stark is to begin with, such as Peter Parker, such as Thor, all of those MCU characters from phases 1 through 3? How do they react to this Tony Stark lookalike Dr. Doom guy? Now, there is one thing that Robert Downey Jr. said in this presentation that has kind of thrown me for a loop, and that is the tagline, "New mask, same task." So right off the bat, you can kind of tie this back to Iron Man, Tony Stark, who wanted to protect the world. He wanted to put armor around the world to protect it. But the way he makes it seem is that now Tony Stark is Dr. Doom in this alternate reality where, yes, maybe he wants to protect the world, but he goes about it in evil ways. And it's actually the downfall of Earth, almost kind of like a Thanos. You know, he feels like he's doing the world a service when in all actuality, he's not. So I am very curious to know what that tagline means, not only for this character, but Tony Stark himself. How do they combine both of those characters to kind of further explain that tagline? It's going to be very interesting to know how they actually bring this variant into the MCU. And that brings me to my next question of how does the Fantastic Four get brought into the mix with Dr. Doom, who is a variant of Tony Stark from that 1960s era, futuristic era that the Fantastic Four movie is set in? How do they get brought to the sacred timeline with all the MCU characters that we know and love? Obviously, there's going to have to be something to where the timelines open up and they cross over to the sacred timeline. I mean, that's the only way that's going to happen, but I'm just curious. I'm just curious about the specifics in that. Like, how do they go about bringing them into that sacred timeline? You know, honestly, I think that's just super messy. I would have preferred them to just be in one freaking timeline. Like, why do we have to? Understand that we're in this multiverse saga. I get that. But it just seems like we're doing a bunch of loopholes, and it feels very soap opera-like in that regard. Which brings me to the flip side of how I feel about Robert Downey Jr. returning to the MCU, and that is I feel dirty about it. I don't necessarily like it, and it's because it feels like a cash grab from Marvel. Marvel is obviously struggling with Phase 4. I mean, they've had, a couple of big hit movies. Shang-Chi was actually pretty damn good. No Way Home was absolutely fantastic. But they've had lots of misses in comparison to Phases 1 through 3, which didn't have all that many misses to begin with. So it just seems like they're tuck and tail here. And, okay, hey, we know that Tony Stark, Robert Downey Jr., is our bread and butter. He was the most popular character in the phases of 1, 2, and 3. How can we bring him back and get people excited about the MCU again? Make it a big event. So it feels like they're trying to capitalize on our nostalgia for phases 1 through 3, and they're trying to bring back the best character, the best actor from those phases, and it just feels cheap. It feels like a cash grab. They don't have an ounce of creativity in them to come up with a different storyline here. Like, why does it have to be Robert Downey Jr.? Why couldn't it be a different actor? There's several actors out there that have been fan casted as Dr. Doom that would have been great choices for Dr. Doom. And now I will say this. I hope that I'm wrong about this. I hope that it is absolutely fucking amazing. I hope that it is a great story. I hope that them incorporating him into the phases of 4 and 5 really works. And I hope that the story is absolutely amazing. And it gives us some great character moments with not only Victor Von Doom and the Fantastic Four, but also the MCU that we know that it is today. So how does this change the overarching narrative of phases 4 and 5 with Kang? So they have really been laying the breadcrumbs for Kang with the TV shows and the movies. And say what you will about Jonathan Majors and his arrest and domestic violence. I mean, dude's a piece of shit. That's obvious. But how do they go about pushing that aside? How do they go about changing the narrative now that we've spent almost an entire phase trying to develop this Kang character as the big bad of phases 4 and 5? So how do they go back and change that? How do they retcon all of that story and now bring in Doctor Doom, which is one of my big issues with this? It feels like we're kind of just shoehorning Doctor Doom into this. I think Doctor Doom is a big enough threat to be an Avengers level villain, but how does that all come about? What happens to Kang? Do they kick him to the side and then come back with phases 6 and 7 for Kang and they just kind of kick it down the road a little bit? Or do they just completely disregard him at all and kind of go to this Doctor Doom storyline, which again, I feel like we're kind of fast tracking this and he deserves to have his time in the sun. I feel like Thanos, yes, he got the breadcrumbs laid, and then Infinity War was basically a Thanos. Does he get his own Infinity War style movie where it's basically Doctor Doom's movie, which I would be 100% down for? And with the movie being titled Doomsday, it seems like we're kind of leaning in that direction. But I hope that they're laying the breadcrumbs down a little bit better than to just spring him in on one movie. My best guess is he's going to show up in Fantastic Four, and then he'll come back for Doomsday, and then back again for Secret Wars. Hopefully he gets dropped a couple of times more throughout the movies. I think you completely disregard him for the TV shows. I mean, look, guys, let's be completely fair here. Other than a couple of the shows, it's been all garbage, really. Marvel is much like Lucasfilm, where they can't craft a great MCU story over the course of 8 to 10 episodes. I mean, other than WandaVision and Falcon and the Winter Soldier, which again, I would call those like mid-tier shows. I wouldn't call them amazing or anything like that. So I would personally prefer them just to stick with those big reveals in the movies. Why not recast Kang? You did it with Rhodey. You did it with Hulk. Why couldn't you do it with Kang? Why didn't we go out and try to get a different character altogether? And if he's showing up as multiple variants, you could legitimately cast him as anybody. So I'm curious to know about the decision on why they decided to push Kang to the back burner and move on to Doctor Doom instead of just recasting Kang altogether. And then the last question that I have is, does this undermine Iron Man's death? Personally, if he's going for a different character, if he is not Tony Stark whatsoever, and he is going to be this new variant, and his name is going to be Victor Von Doom, no tie to Tony Stark, with the exclusion that he looks like him, then I don't think it undermines his death whatsoever. I hope they don't bring him back as Tony Stark, and he takes on this persona of Victor Von Doom, but he was Tony Stark in another alternate universe. I hope they're not doing that. It does undermine Iron Man's death a little bit. And I don't know what it is about Marvel bringing back characters that have had great send-offs. I mean, say what you will about the MCU, say what you will about Fox, Century, X-Men. They crafted spectacular finales for 2 characters. Iron Man had one of the best send-offs ever. I remember it feeling like I just got stabbed in the heart when that happened because, I mean, basically, guys, I grew up on that shit. And then same thing with Wolverine and Hugh Jackman. That was one of the first superhero movies that I ever went and saw in theaters was X-Men, the OG. And I have basically grew up with Hugh Jackman being Wolverine. So when Logan came out, it was, again, like someone just stabbed me in the heart just because I had spent so long with his character and him acting as that character. So them bringing back Tony Stark to play as a different persona of Victor Von Doom, I would not be down for that. I think it does undermine his death a little bit, but something tells me that they're not going to go with that. Like, they specifically mentioned that he would be Victor Von Doom. I'm just going to assume that people are going to recognize him as Tony Stark, and he's going to be like, I'm not fucking Tony Stark, fuck off. That kind of thing. But overall, guys, I'm disappointed that they didn't go a different route, but I'm intrigued by it. And I think both of those things could be true at the exact same time. I can be intrigued by it, but I'm also kind of like, this was a poor choice by Kevin Feige and Marvel. You could have come up with a better idea than casting Robert Downey Jr. as Doctor Doom. I hope to God the story is absolutely fucking amazing, but I'm hesitant. I'm hesitant about it. But guys, let me know down in the comments below what you think about Robert Downey Jr. returning to the MCU, this time as Victor Von Doom / Doctor Doom himself. Are you excited or are you not? But other than that, guys, I will catch y'all next time on another episode. Laters.